The story of the Yuba County Five is a haunting American mystery that has puzzled investigators, families, and amateur sleuths for decades. It is a tale of 5 young men who drove into the California wilderness for a basketball game and never returned, leaving behind a trail of confusing clues and a scene that defied all logic. Because its bizarre and tragic nature echoes the famous Dyatlov Pass incident in Russia, it has earned the nickname the American Dyatlov Pass. Our story begins in the city of Yuba City, California. In the winter of 1978, the 5 men at the heart of this mystery were all friends, and each faced their own personal challenges. There was Bill Sterling, aged 29, who was the unofficial leader of the group. He was a skilled mechanic, reliable, and had a car, which made him the natural choice to drive. Then there was Jack Madruga, also 29, an outgoing and friendly man who loved sports. Jack Hoot, aged 24, was the youngest and somewhat shy and childlike. He looked up to the others. Ted Weiher, aged 32, was a gentle, kind-hearted man who was slightly developmentally disabled. Finally, there was Gary Mathias, aged 25. Gary was different from the others. He had been diagnosed with a mild form of schizophrenia and took medication for it. But when he was on his medication, he was high-functioning, a former high school basketball star, and known to be a protective figure for the others, especially Ted. All 5 men lived at home with their parents and spent much of their time together, often attending games of the local semi-professional basketball team, the Marysville Giants. On the evening of Friday, February 24, 1978, they planned to drive to a college basketball game about 70 miles away in Chico, California. Bill Sterling was driving his bright yellow 1969 Mercury Montego. The plan was simple: drive to Chico, watch the game, and drive back home. It was a trip they had made many times before. They left Yuba City around 6 p.m. The game at Chico State University started at 7:30 p.m. and ended around 9:30 p.m. Witnesses confirmed seeing them at the game. They were cheering and having a good time, behaving completely normally. After the game, they were seen in the parking lot, and everything seemed fine. This was the last confirmed sighting of the Yuba County Five together. They seemingly vanished into the night. Back in Yuba City, their families grew worried as the night wore on and the men did not return. It was unlike Bill Sterling, in particular, to be late without calling. By the next morning, with still no sign of them, the families reported all 5 men missing. The initial search was concentrated along the most logical route between Chico and Yuba City State Route 99, a well-traveled, flat highway. Police, family, and friends scoured the roadside, checked hospitals, and contacted everyone they could think of. They found nothing. There was no sign of Bill Sterling's yellow Mercury, no reports of an accident, and no word from any of the men. It was as if the car and its 5 occupants had been swallowed by the earth. The first major break in the case came 4 months later. On June 4th, 1978, a U.S. Forest Service worker was surveying a remote, rugged area known as the Plumas National Forest, deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains. This was not along the route home. In fact, it was in the complete opposite direction. The men should have never been anywhere near this place. The worker was on a Forest Service road called Oroville-Quincy Road, high up in the mountains at an elevation of over 4,500 feet, where the snow drifts could still be 20 feet deep, even in early June. There, perched precariously on a mountainside, he spotted a car. It was a yellow Mercury Montego. The location was shocking. It was 70 miles from Chico and in a direction that made no sense for their journey home. The car was found on a rough, unpaved logging road that was notoriously difficult to navigate, even in good weather, let alone on a cold February night. The car was out of gas, and its battery was dead. But the most puzzling details were inside and around the vehicle. The car was in working order, aside from having no fuel. One of its tires was slightly damaged, but it was still drivable. Inside, investigators found jackets, wallets, a pair of brand new sneakers, and a bag of groceries from the night they disappeared. There was also a basketball ticket stub. The car was not stuck. It seemed to have been simply parked and abandoned. The keys were gone. Even more strangely, searchers found footprints leading away from the car, up the mountain, into the deep snow. The footprints were of 4 distinct sets of shoes, and they were walking in an orderly, single-file line, as if they were purposefully hiking somewhere. There was no sign of a struggle or panic. The discovery of the car deepened the mystery. Why did they drive 70 miles in the wrong direction? Why did they turn off the main highway and navigate up a treacherous mountain road in the middle of the night? And why, when the car ran out of gas, did they all voluntarily leave it together and walk up into the freezing snow-covered wilderness? The search for the men now focused on the mountains around the abandoned car. It was a massive and dangerous undertaking due to the rugged terrain and remaining snow. For weeks, searchers on foot and in helicopters found nothing. Then, on June 8, 1978, another clue was found, about 12 miles from the abandoned car and 3,000 feet higher in elevation. A remote U.S. Forest Service trailer was discovered. This trailer was a small, one-room emergency shelter for forest workers, stocked with food, bedding, and supplies. It was located in an incredibly isolated spot called Emigrant Gap. When searchers forced open the locked door of the trailer, they were met with a grim and confusing scene. Inside, they found the body of Ted Wyhar. He was wrapped in blankets and had apparently died from starvation and hypothermia. An autopsy would later reveal he had lived for approximately 8 to 13 weeks after the group disappeared. This was a staggering revelation. Ted had survived for up to 3 months in that trailer, but the scene inside the trailer made no sense. There was a supply of canned food and powdered milk, enough to last for many months, yet the food had not been touched. The stove in the trailer was not used for heat, even though there was fuel for it. There were matches right next to the stove. Most baffling of all, one window of the trailer was broken from the inside, and pieces of paneling had been torn off the walls, as if for firewood, but no fire was ever lit. It seemed Ted had simply laid down and slowly starved to death in a shelter full of food and the means to make a fire. The remains of 3 other men, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jack Hoot, were found in the following weeks scattered in the forest between the car and the trailer. They had all succumbed to hypothermia. Gary Mathias, the 5th man, was never found. His remains have never been located, despite extensive searches over the years. The official investigation concluded that the men had suffered from a collective case of highway hypnosis or disorientation, leading them to make a series of fatal wrong turns. The theory was that they got lost, ran out of gas, and then made the disastrous decision to leave the car and seek help, ultimately dying from exposure. Ted Wyhar, who was less physically robust, was left in the trailer while the others went for help. However, this official explanation leaves many disturbing questions unanswered. Why did they drive so far in the wrong direction without turning around? Why did they abandon a warm, safe car to trek into a blizzard? Why, when they found a shelter stocked with food and fuel, did they not use it to survive? Why was the trailer door locked from the outside? And where was the key? And what happened to Gary Mathias? Over the years, many alternative theories have been proposed. Some suggest the men were fleeing from a dangerous person or a threat, perhaps witnessed a crime, or were being chased. Others wonder if Gary Mathias, who was off his medication, may have had a psychotic episode and led the others into the wilderness, though this does not explain why the others followed him. There is a theory that they may have been the victims of foul play, but there was never any evidence of violence on the bodies that were found. The most mundane theory is that they simply made a catastrophic series of errors, a perfect storm of bad decisions fueled by panic and confusion. The families of the Yuba County Five have never found peace or closure. The case remains an open, painful wound. The image of Ted Wyhar slowly dying of hunger in a room full of food is one of the most haunting and inexplicable details in the annals of unsolved mysteries. The story of the 5 young men who drove away from a basketball game and into the heart of a dark, cold mountain serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the truth remains forever out of reach, buried under the snow and silence of the wilderness.